Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Restoring Rapport Podcast. We're super excited to have you here today. Thank you for choosing this show to listen to out of all the things that you could have chosen, audiobooks, music, other podcasts. We really appreciate you being here while you're working out, driving, cleaning house, whatever it is that you're doing. Thank you for listening. And today I've got a really special session for you guys coming up. I'm going to be interviewing the founder of Techless and the creator of the Wisephone. His name is Kaspar. He's a husband to a wife and father to 3 biological children and 6 foster children. He has a vision for, to what I understand to be prioritizing relationship in a world of digital distraction and keeping technology within the boundaries that it's supposed to be in. So thank you so much for being here today, Chris. It's an honor to have you on the show and glean all the wisdom that you're going to give to our listeners today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Chris, before we dive into the questions that I have laid out for you today, first I'm going to just tell our audience kind of a summary of what we're going to be talking about. And because Chris has started this company, today we're going to be talking about keeping relationship and community and connections central in a world where technology is trying to and big tech is trying to constantly overstep its bounds in our lives and take more time from us than it's actually designed to have. So, Chris, can you just, before we get into the questions, can you just share a little bit about yourself and what you value?
Sure. So in a nutshell, kind of like the podcast, I value relationships deeply. We are not necessarily a Christian company, but I'm a believer. You think about the 2 greatest commandments. If you Jesus summed them up, is love God, love people, very simply. And that's what makes me excited. I'm a pastor of a home church. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're just pursuing rich relationships with one another and rich relationships with the Lord. And I know that resonates with your audience. So we have a lot of common ground here. But that's what gets me excited at the end of the day, is when I see something working there.
Absolutely. Now you said you're a pastor of a home church. I don't know this about you quite yet. Is your home church, is it like an institutional church building, or do you guys meet in a home, or what's the setup there?
Yeah. So we started probably 18 months ago, and it's really kind of based off of Francis Chan's model, We Are Church, if anyone's familiar with that. But no, we meet in our house. And then once we get big enough, we multiply into different groups. And so far we've multiplied and we're in 2 groups, because at one point Sunday mornings, we're having 45 people in our house, 25 of which are kids. And it just got a little crazy.
Oh, wow.
But basically we meet in the mornings and sit around and talk about what God's taught us that previous week.
That's amazing. Chris, this is definitely a providential orchestration for sure. I haven't told you this, but I'm actually in a home church group as well. And when I say home church, I don't mean a church building. I mean, we meet in homes bi-weekly, and we do that exact thing. We discuss what God is teaching us and doing in our lives, and it's just a really great. It's been a pivotal point of my life for sure. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I'll just go ahead and dive right into our questions today. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about why you started Techless and what your purpose was behind making this company that is focused on digital limitation?
Sure. Yeah. So, I was working in our family business. We have a 120-year-old company. I'm a 5th generation owner. And so kind of had the red carpet rolled out for me, I guess you could say, as far as life was good. But at the same time, it rang hollow. And I was asking myself, okay, what am I doing for the kingdom of God? And I was making a profound impact to that family business. We made a huge difference. We employ 500 people. We made some major cultural shifts and initiatives there, but I wanted something more. And so I took a step away from that and really just with a blank canvas and said, hey, what's out there? What could I do to make a difference? And through a handful of experiences, kind of came up with 20 business concepts, chose the top 2. And around that time, my wife and I were doing foster care. And we had 10 and 13-year-old girls. They were dropped off at our house. And the caseworker said, don't let these girls near anything that looks like a smartphone. And this is right in the time when I'm like doing numbers on all these different business concepts and all this stuff. And we were really wrestling with it because, it's right at the age where they want phones, they want technology. We wanted to be the kind of parents that say yes and wanted to empower them and trust them, but there were no good options out there on the market. And we were stuck. And finally, we figured out that Amazon Alexa was a pretty cool device because it's this non-visual interface to the internet, and we could give it to them. And we didn't have to worry about it. I mean, the worst they could do is listen to some music with some expletives in it, but it wasn't sucking their soul away quite the way that their previous experiences with a smartphone had. And I just realized, it clicked for me, that device level restrictions are something that nobody's ever tackled, and you can infuse morality into it and design things that have boundaries that are healthy for people at certain ages. And then just looking at one of the greatest things that really has affected our generation is the whole pornography epidemic. And so combining that with just seeing people's lights in their eyes go dull because they've been drowned out and dulled by screens, kind of this perfect conglomeration of our experience plus this cultural movement towards healthier tech, it kind of all came together. And I said, this is what I have to do. And at the end of the day, it's a pretty big risk. I mean, this company either succeeds or fails. There is no in between. Real estate, worst case scenario, you sell whatever you invested in and get for a 30% loss or something, but this is binary. And so this is definitely something that God, it's risky. And so if it's going to succeed, it's God's hands, obviously. It's a pretty crazy endeavor for us. And so we just gave it to him and said, let's do it. And so we dove in.
That is absolutely amazing. A couple things stand out to me about that story. You started off by talking about how you're kind of part of this 5th generation family business, and we talk a lot about, I haven't told you this either, but on the show we talk a lot about this multi-generational family team where each member is actually adding to the family that they're a part of instead of kind of resetting after marriage and starting their own. So yeah, it's really interesting you brought that up. I don't know if you've heard of Jefferson Bethke and a lot of the work that he's doing with family teams now, but you have, okay. He talks a lot about that. So that was just something interesting that I heard you say. Also, I love the fact that the kind of the vision for this Techless movement started with kids, with these foster kids that you had. That was just so interesting to me, because I think a lot of the times kids by our culture are a lot of times seen as just kind of not really thought about, in the sense of they're often perceived as a burden, or they're undesirable to have around, that kind of thing. And it's just really interesting that not only did you make the choice to have those people and pour into those little souls, but they were the starting point for this amazing company that I've seen come into being. So that's just really cool. Can you talk a little bit about what the Techless Mission is? I watched a video on YouTube that was, I think it was called the Techless Manifesto or something, and it talked a lot about your core values as a company, and also what your intentions were regarding your products and your mission, your message.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, we're really here to help people that want healthy technology. That's kind of the high level. And so if there's people that want to make intentional choices, we're here for them. But kind of secondarily, we're here to destroy digital addiction. It's a huge problem. Like the purpose of this podcast, we're here to restore relationships and to grow relationships. And then also we're looking at preventing pornography. I mean, this is just a nationwide challenge, and we want to be on the forefront of preventing kids. I mean, early exposure. And then people that, we have a lot of men that use our products that are older because they don't trust their normal smartphone. They don't trust themselves with it. And this is one of the only good options out there. And so we're just helping people that want to fight this personally and live life the way God designed us to live life.
That's really good. A couple of things you mentioned there too, just really align with the purpose of this show, which is, first of all, the preventing pornography. Pornography in itself is, any marriage and family therapist will tell you that it's horribly destructive to relationships of any kind, especially within the family. It tears apart marriage. That's sex, money, and communication, I think, are the three main causes of divorce in this country, and pornography is at the top of that list within the sexual category. So you guys preventing that, that is just, that even though your mission is within technology, that's a direct step towards reprioritizing and protecting relationship for people. So totally on board with you there. I know just a couple of resources for people who are looking to prevent that and protect their children from that. Find the New Drug is a great business that's actually designed to help people make informed decisions about the negative effects of porn. Exodus Cry is another great one. They don't argue religious arguments. They give firsthand stories, personal narratives, science. That's what they use to make their points. Another great one is Covenant Eyes. It's a screen accountability program where you actually set up these not mentors, but accountability partners, and the program actually takes screenshots of your devices and sends them to your accountability partners. And what that does is it keeps connection open between you two, and it kind of tears down the walls of secrecy. So those are just some great programs that you guys can get into for those of you who are looking to limit porn. Chris, do you believe that technology is a bad thing, or that, like money, it's a good thing that can be hijacked?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex discussion. You could write a book on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
to answer the question. Inherently, no, it's not evil. But no technology is neutral. There is no such thing as neutral technology. So it can be evil and it can be good. It is powerful. It is potent. And just like you said, just like money, it's something to be very wary of, not overtly fearful of, but just be cautious. Would you trust yourself with $100 million? Maybe, but if you're smart, you would put up protections around that money to protect your heart when using it. And would you hand your kid $10 million? You think about what that could do to them. It could bless them. But the odds are, unless you're being very intentional about it, it's going to destroy them entirely. So,
yeah, that makes total sense. I know that a lot of people, you and I were talking about we touched on this yesterday when we met to discuss this show. And one of the things that you mentioned was that there are a lot of resources out there for people regarding financial wisdom. I think of Dave Ramsey and his Financial Peace University and all that he's done. There's just huge amounts of money advice out there, but I don't think there is as much technological advice, digital advice, teaching people how to steward their technology and their life. So I really appreciate, that's another reason that I really appreciate what you guys are doing, is I think you're filling a niche that is not quite filled by anyone within the Christian community or just the country, period. So absolutely, totally appreciate what you guys are doing again.
It's really kind of just a new conversation. Literally, I was born before the internet. And so we have a very unsophisticated understanding of what's going on and how this stuff is affecting us. And so we're just now starting to realize how profoundly this rewires us. And we're starting to understand, whoa, there's way more than meets the surface. And so I think you and I are starting this conversation, but 10 years from now, there will be some definitions that aren't even created right now. It's just cutting edge discussion about what this is actually doing to us.
Yeah, totally agree. Can you go over some of the ways that technology, this good thing, this powerful thing, this potent thing, has been hijacked by culture or whatever it is in recent years?
Yeah, it's fairly obvious on some levels. I think, the purpose of your podcast is really looking at relationship. Tech has completely redefined what relationship even looks like. The relationships now have just universally become much more superficial, much more hollow. We've lost the depth and the nuance of eye contact, and we've distilled debate down to 140 characters. And, it's like poking at one another and not even, and so that's definitely become more hollow. And another thing that I think is pretty interesting, people always used to say, oh, having a high IQ is good. And then people realize, hey, having a high EQ is good. Like if you look at successful CEOs, a lot of them have very high EQ, emotional intelligence. And I think one of the big kind of budding trends right now is just straight up people's ability to focus. And tech has destroyed that. Multitasking, think about the platforms that are successful: Twitter, TikTok, all of these just put these tiny little bite-sized chunks that just make your brain fire constantly, rapidly, dopamine hit after dopamine hit. And it's not long-form content. It's not anything with depth. And so I think like the next group of people that are going to be profoundly successful are people that are going to have the ability to sit down and think for 2 hours and just ponder something. And that's being destroyed right now by our tech.
Absolutely. I think of all the ways that specifically teenagers today, but even adults, how the period they can go without their phone naturally is very small, unless they enforce their will and say, I'm not going to pull out my iPhone right now. Naturally, it's right there in their pocket or on their counter, and I mean, it's just a part of them. They just naturally pick it up, and then that's why we're racking up all these screen time hours a day. That all of that screen time is time that you're not engaging with people, and I think that's one of the things that this show just thinks is dangerous, because you're all the time that you're spending with that technology, you're letting it infringe. It's infringing on your ability to connect with other people. So yeah, totally relate to what you said there. Another thing is the debate that you mentioned, dumbed down to like 140 characters on Facebook, those little political exchanges and stuff. And I think people there, it ruins connection there, because sometimes we forget that we're actually talking to a person, and we think we're just talking to an avatar or something. And so we get a little bit more disrespectful in the way we communicate an opinion. So that's another way that what you just said stood out to me. But yeah, I totally agree with those. And I see those all around me in the technological world and in the relational world. Big tech industries, you mentioned Twitter and Facebook, I think. Big tech industries like Apple and Facebook have managed to make themselves irreplaceable and constantly present within the lives of so many people today. Can you talk a little bit about where the big tech industry is today and what their end goal is, what their purpose is?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Well, and I think about this like regularly. I mean, literally CES is going on right now. And it's like the biggest tech event of the year. I've gone the last 2 years, and when I go, I just ponder and I ask myself this question. And, The Social Dilemma came out. The documentary, if you hadn't seen it, go watch it. It's awesome. But I have to ask myself, okay, why? I don't know if you've heard the principle of 5 whys. Ask why, 5 back, and then ask yourself, why were they originally created? What was their purpose in the creation? And if you really distill it down, and there's lots of implications, like the assumptions that they were built on kind of feed back to that. Why were they created? And at the end of the day, these are Silicon Valley venture capital firms that people put in $1 and they want $1 million out. And it happened. I mean, these venture capitalists are just buku's rich, and that's their purpose for existence. And I'm not saying that that's inherently evil, but it's just something to be conscious of in the back of your mind, that they're not here for us. They're not here to serve us, to make the world a better place. They might have some company slogan or motto, something like that. But at the end of the day, their loyalties are to the shareholder almost entirely. And they get away with whatever they can get away with. And they milk the attention. They are designed to use our attention to milk us in order to create dollars.
Right.
So just look at it through that lens. And then you can kind of see where it's going to go. Shoot, this week I'm writing a video script right now. I'm going to post on YouTube. This week is crazy as far as just unveiling what's beneath the surface as far as big tech's concerned. In my mind, there's a new chapter that got unfolded this last 2 weeks with the ban on Trump. And I'm not even going to get political or conservative or liberal here, but just the notion that an entire political narrative that could be held by 45% of Americans is now officially banned.
Censored,
It's a very scary thing, and there's a very kind of sinister undertone to it. And I don't want to dive in. I could talk for a while about that.
Right.
But there's a new chapter here, and it makes me very nervous. For the first time, I'm not a fearful person. I'm a courageous guy, but for the first time in my life, as you're asking this question, 2 weeks ago, I would have painted a different picture, and I'm a little bit more nervous than I have ever been in my life as far as where big tech is leading us, because, and not just us, the world. These are the most powerful forces in the world. And the Russian Communist Party leader, who's all about anti-corruption in Russia, he's nervous about the decisions here that have been made that set precedent and the global implications on Russia. I mean, it's just crazy what happened this last week. So it's a good question.
It is, yeah. I actually got that question from something on your site, and it really stood out to me because, that's a hard question. I think most people don't even consider because they just consume. They're just consuming Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and whatever they can, however it can serve them, but they don't really think about what the purpose of those companies is. And I think you have a good point in pointing out their primary purpose anyway is not trying to connect you with other people. Their primary purpose is to make $1. So I think that's just good for people to keep in mind, because what if the things that start making them dollars are actually destroying your connection? And I think that's when people have to, your connection with other people. So I think that's when people have to, perk their ears up and say, hey, I need to know what's going on here and be aware of what these companies are doing. Chris, I actually watched a censorship video that you put on YouTube recently. I don't remember when exactly it was, but it was very good. You made some great points, and I think people would miss that. I think they would miss just because these huge companies are so integrated into our lives, they would miss those little things that the company does that are really big, devastating decisions. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
And one other thing, I mean, you got to look at the moral boundaries these companies do or don't set for themselves. I mean, like Google, if you think about what Google is, they are the largest proliferator of pornography in the entire world. If you think about Amazon, they're the largest web hosting service. They host petabytes of pornography, and they sat down in a board meeting at one point and said, are we going to block this or not? And they said, no, we want it because it makes us money. And so that's their stance. So you just got to look at it through that lens, and they can make that decision, but we also have a decision on how to respond and react to that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's totally good. On your website, I noticed you guys have done digging into the effects of social media on self-esteem, sleep, focus, the human experience. Can you give a rundown of the Techless digital wellness philosophy? I saw that you guys have a digital wellness philosophy, so I'm curious as to what that is.
Yeah, so this is a living document. As I said, this whole digital wellness thing is being defined as we're talking about it. Like we are verbally processing this even now. But we do have some hard and fast rules. One, we don't allow pornography because we just believe it's destructive. Two, we stay away from anything that could be addictive. And then one of the big lenses that we use is, does this improve your relationships or take away from them? And then another thing that we do, we really ask, okay, one of the hard and fast lines that I think really differentiates us from a lot of other companies is we ask, does this technology empower your will or does it empower its will? And so the way I describe this is, think about a shovel. Like every tool we use impresses itself upon us in some way. So a shovel, if you use a shovel all day long, your hands will grow calluses. Yeah. And that's the impression it makes upon you. But at the end of the day, you set the shovel down and it sits there and waits in the corner for you to go pick it up again. So that's not the way technology works. Technology isn't just a tool that sits there. The shovel opens its mouth and bugs you and says, use me, use me, use me. And it feeds you dopamine hits when you do use it. And it's like, it's unlike any tool that we've ever used before. And at the end of the day, it is designed to control us, to impress its will upon us. And so that's a huge fundamental boundary that we put as far as our tech is here for you. So what do you want to accomplish? We're here to help that, and very hands-off as far as how we alert, notify, we impress upon your life. It's your life.
Yeah. Wow, that shovel analogy you put it there was really good. That was really good, because the shovel is a tool in the sense of it's here to help you towards a goal, and it doesn't actually cross boundaries into your life. But technology is this tool that we have that can, yes, help us. It's extremely potent and powerful, like you mentioned earlier, but it also has the potential to speak to us and say, hey, pick me up. Hey, carry me around in your pocket. Hey, look at me first thing in the morning. I noticed that you guys have a for those of you who have never been to the Techless website, you can go to techless.com, and they have a tech addiction quiz that you could take. I took the quiz, and the questions are really great. They get right down to the nitty gritty of what it looks like to be ingratiated with technology. And so I would just highly recommend that quiz that you can take. And one of those questions talked about how demanding tech is. How much is it asking you to do something? How much is it the first thing you look at in the morning? Was one of the, is it the last thing that you do before you go to bed? Just these questions are great to ask yourself, and think of the other things that you could be doing then. I'm not saying technology, you need to kick it out entirely, and I'm sure Techless is not saying that either, but what we're saying is that, what could you be doing with those last 5 minutes that you're scrolling social media on before you go to bed? Could you be talking to, if you're married, could you be talking to your spouse about something that happened during the day? Could you be tucking your kids in at night if you're a parent? Could you be engaging in a prayer if you're a believer? What could you be doing that could perhaps be more beneficial to you, and could prevent you from being addicted to something? So those are all really, really great points. Techless, Chris Techless talks a lot about digital minimalism. For those people who don't know what this is, could you explain this lifestyle and its relational benefits, or just its benefits in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of feeds off the last question pretty well. To help kind of illustrate it, I mean, I have a close family member of mine. He owns 8 different properties, and they're all kind of recreational properties. And he wanted these to be recreational, leisure time, but they've actually started to consume his life. He puts tons of time in it and is constantly repairing and driving around, and it's just a hassle. And I don't think they're bringing him the joy that he thought they could bring. And that's kind of an extreme example, but take that and apply it to our stuff, our digital stuff. I mean, many of you guys probably are more familiar with the idea of just minimalism in general. I mean, Marie Kondo has hit it off high. The concept's simple. Instead of just taking everything that you could, ask yourself, what do you actually need? What do you actually want? What brings me the life that I actually intended? What brings me peace? What's healthy for my relationships? And just cut everything else out. I mean, it's a very simple concept, but it's very hard to do. You're fighting human nature. And so apply that same thing to your digital life, and ask yourself these hard, intentional questions, and then just relentlessly with a scalpel chop away. And that's what it is.
So good. That's so good. I watched a YouTube video and wrote an article that's since been published in my second book. For those of you listening, if you haven't got that yet, go ahead and go on Amazon, search Deep in the Dance of Dependence, Prioritizing Relationship Amidst Gen Z Individualism, and get your copy of that today. I highly recommend it, obviously, as the author. But one of the things I talk about in there is this analogy where this person on YouTube gives a jar of your life analogy. And they say, you only have so much room in the jar of your life. And if you fill it up with the small things first, so that would be the phones, the extracurriculars, the social engagements that aren't really for your connection, just the pleasantry type things. If you fill your life up with those, then the important things will not fit. And then they turn the experiment around and they say, if you put the large things in first, the key elements of what it is to be human in first, connections with God and other people, if you put that in first, then you can fill it up with sand and everything fits in the jar. And their point was, you have to set your priorities straight and get what matters first. So your marriage, your family, your connections with other people, the deep ones, and then you can fill things up with potent things like technology, extracurriculars, things that consume your time. Is there anything you would add to that, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, so that's a really good analogy. It makes me think of this exercise that my wife and I did. We kind of a minimalist exercise where we wrote on a note card everything we want to do in life. We had 340 note cards and spread them out across the floor, and this took us months to accomplish. And then we had poker chips, and each poker chip represented 1 hour in a month that we had to accomplish that thing. And we started putting, hey, here's how much time we have to do this and this and this. And what was crazy is we expected for ourselves to accomplish 3 times as much stuff as we could possibly even accomplish with the hours that we had in the day. And
Wow.
so what was most profound to us was the no's. I didn't need to keep the yeses because the yeses were obvious, but the no's are the things that I wanted to like frame and like hang on my
Yeah.
wall to remind myself that this isn't what's important. And we ended up throwing 220 cards away of stuff that we just couldn't do. And a lot of it was good things, you know, but it
Yeah.
wasn't the best of things. And that's what's important, is focusing exactly like you just said on what is absolutely important and being relentless about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. One of my favorite authors actually talks about that postcard experiment that you just did. I don't know if you've heard it from him or not, but that's just such a good exercise to do, even if you don't have a family. Just, this is the time that I have, and that's all that I have. It's not getting any bigger or smaller, so I can choose how to use that. And basically exactly what he said. Put exactly what Chris pointed out. Putting what matters up top. And technology, something that also stood out to me while Chris was talking a couple seconds or a couple points ago, and I didn't say it, was that technology is kind of, in theory, made us more connected than ever, because you know, you can instantly get in touch with anybody and be like directly in their life. People post photos about what they had for lunch, like, and you can see that across the world. You know, and it's just amazing how, in theory, connected you are. But another one of my favorite authors says that it's the paradox of the American culture, that through technology we're that connected, but we're also so disconnected because none of it's face to face. We're disconnected, we're quote disconnected, fragmented, splintered, cropped, and edited people. That, I mean, that to me is shocking, that you can be that connected and be disconnected. It is a paradox. Chris, would you say you've seen that in people's lives, where they're, you know, in theory, you could reach out and text somebody whenever you wanted, and that's connection, right? But somehow, because the iPhone has throwing so many distractions at you, it's actually making you more disconnected from those around you.
Yeah. And we actually have sort of developed somewhat of a hierarchy here to help us understand what we're trying to push people towards. And we always want to push people towards the highest level of connection possible. So, you know, philosophically, a call is better than a text. A video chat is better than a call, and face-to-face is like the pinnacle. And so we are always doing whatever we can from a design perspective to push people up the ladder to prevent exactly what you just described.
That's great. That's great. I love that. And I think that's something that you will not see tech companies doing, because they're about convenience. They know that they can get customers through convenience, and it's more convenient to send a text or an email than it is to actually set up a FaceTime meeting, because, you know, you don't have to get ready. You don't have to take the intentional time to sit down and have that blocked off piece of time. You can just type something out and push a button. So technology, or big tech companies, are going to go for the more convenient option. But one of the quotes from the Techless Manifesto video that I watched said, quote, "Connection matters more than convenience," and then end quote. That's something that I think really needs to be modeled by more people. And yeah, that's just a really great point that we brought up today. And we haven't even started talking about um, the actual products that Techless has for families yet, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first, Chris, how do we make sure that kids are tech literate? They can understand, they're tech savvy, they know how tech works, without making them oversaturated and making them, you know, just consumed by technology.
Yeah, so I've had a few parents ask me this. I have some parents that give their kids iPads like early at age 5, because they said, oh, the best brilliant coders come out of kids that have access to technology early. And that question of how do we make sure our kids are tech literate, I actually think it's the wrong question.
Mm-hmm.
It's like asking, well, how can I be certain that my kids will know how to spend money when I give it to them? They'll know. I think it'd be very difficult to raise a tech illiterate kid. The right question is, how do we build kids with the character inside of them to navigate the tech world with wisdom and the intentionality that will change their lives? Because that's so much more of an important priority You know, if you had to choose, and I'm not saying this is actually the real choice, but between an awkward homeschool kid that has noble character and a tech savvy kid that's life is a mess, I think
Yeah.
that's an obvious choice.
Yeah.
And I'm just giving an extreme example.
Right.
But kids don't need help to figure out tech. If you hand a phone to a 14-year-old for the first time in their life, it won't take them 20 minutes and they'll know more than
Yeah.
you will about it, just guaranteed.
Interesting.
So
Yeah. That's really good. Something else that I immediately thought of when I got this question from a parent question on the techless.com website. And did you guys, I don't know if the listeners know this, but Steve Jobs did not let his kids have an iPad. And to me, that says he knew he was close to the fire. He knew what it was. He knew what it was designed to do. And he said, no, you guys are actually not going to have one of these.
yeah, all
I mean,
the Silicon Valley guys. Yeah, all of them.
yeah.
I mean, I read a month ago, I read a contract for a nanny who was watching a Silicon Valley exec. And in the contract with their nanny, it said, if you let my kids look at a phone or any type of screen, it's like $1,000 penalty against your pay. I mean, that's how big of a deal it is. They know what they're doing and they know how destructive this is. So yeah, they're aware.
Yeah, that should say something. That the people who are creating these devices, these tech entities, are keeping their own kids from it. Obviously, their kids presumably are the people they love most in the world, and they're keeping them from this thing. That should send up a red flag to us as consumers, I think. But so anyway, that's just a good point that I wanted to bring up before we move on to what actually you guys are doing practically to fix this problem. And Techless has developed a smartphone alternative called the Wisephone. What makes the Wisephone a better alternative to the smartphone, and what makes it more human?
Yeah, so just in a nutshell, what Wisephone is, so that you can imagine it, because it's very simple conceptually, but sometimes people have a really hard time imagining it. It's a smartphone, but imagine all the apps are gone, and all you can do in very plain text English, no icons, no crazy colors, is you can call, you can text, you have maps, you have photos, and a few basic tools like a clock or a calculator. I mean, it's very, very basic. But what it's designed to serve are parents that want to give their kids something they can trust. I mean, right now in the parenting world, when I'm looking for a phone for my foster kids, I've got the option of flip phones, which kids like hide, they hang their head down low because they're embarrassing, honestly. And have you ever tried texting in T9? It's awful. It doesn't lead to quality communication. And there's a couple other minimalist phones out there, but the truth is a lot of them develop their own hardware, and hardware is expensive and difficult, and they just didn't nail it yet. So like e-ink screens are just hard to type on. And then the third option is smartphones with filtering apps or with restrictions. And I will say, if you're a super tech savvy parent that wants to spend 30 hours researching and then every other month research more before some new app update comes out, then you could take an iPhone maybe and lock it down. But this thing was not designed by any means. And Apple, Google, these guys do not care about this particular, safety type of thing for kids. And so they'll push updates that just release new vulnerabilities. I mean, there's apps in the App Store that look like calculator apps that are actually windows to porn. There are, Google, Android, it is impossible to remove the Google search bar no matter what you do. I mean, I've done deep level hacking stuff. I'm a tech guy, and you cannot remove the Google search bar from an Android phone. And so we care. We are the only people that care at this point. And so just from the ground up design for parents, for digital minimalists, for people that want to make this intentional choice. So that's kind of what separates us at the highest level.
Yeah, that's great. On the website, they say that another thing that appealed to me about this company is they say that it's a phone for families and digital minimalists, and that's their target audience. That totally makes sense. That Apple makes its money through making everything convenient, and Google does the same thing. They're not going to take away their access to Google from their Google phone. Like that wouldn't make that makes total sense. How can you protect yourself and your kids from this just a crazy material that is kind of always there? I was watching an interview of Chris, and he talked about, he was on this is on the Techless YouTube channel that I highly recommend. You should go check it out. And he was talking about he would open the news app or something, and he just scrolled a couple seconds, and there was explicit material in the news app. Like, it's just so what's the word? Everything's so connected in Apple that all the bad stuff just filters straight into basically you can get to it from anywhere.
Yeah, and the scary thing about that is that my phone was locked down. I had intensive restrictions. I mean, my wife has the passcode to it, and my phone should have been safe. But yet Apple pushed an update. The news app didn't exist when I went to bed that night. I woke up the next morning and the news app was there, opened it up, and here's a new vulnerability, because they don't think about this type of stuff. No. This isn't who they made it for. And so that's the dangerous side of it. I mean, Apple released at CES last year, they bought a massive, 14-story billboard, and it said, what happens on this phone stays on this phone, which is kind of a play off of the Las Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's not some lighthearted joke. That's a very dark thing to say if you think about what it means. What are they actually selling? They're selling secrecy, privacy. I mean, they're selling sex. I mean, in a nutshell, and you can get away with it with us. I mean, that's what they stand for. And we are on the total opposite side of the continuum. We are vulnerability. You cannot delete your text messages. Whew, that makes some people nervous. Well, guess what? There's grace for stuff, but we're just very, very stark contrast from a design perspective. You'd be amazed at how morality plays into design. I mean, all the way down to which emojis do you have? I mean, it's crazy when you really get into it.
That's such a good point. And honestly, one of my favorite things that I've seen about the Wisephone particularly is the openness, because I think that's a key in developing any type of healthy relationship, not just the honesty, but if there is a problem, then you probably need help with it. Like, it might not be something that you can fix. So you need to be open enough to where you can share that with a community or your partner if you're married, or you're just other people. Because if you can't beat it yourself, there's no way you're going to beat it unless you bring in a team. So I love that the Wisephone does that, makes everything open. And in addition to the Wisephone, Chris, what are some other ways that we can protect our relationships from digital distractions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to by any means venture to tell you how to parent here.
Right.
Or even, not just yourself, but I would just say be a bit more nervous than you are. I mean, think of technology as you think of wealth and power. Millions of dollars in your hand. You've got something that is just dangerous. So, I mean, be careful, be prayerful, pursue coaching. I mean, there's not coaching out there right now, but communicate about it, get training, set loving boundaries for yourself, for other people, allow room for grace for mistakes. I mean, when it comes to parenting specifically, I know Wisephone itself is fairly high control in the sense that you can see everything your kid's doing. I don't think that's necessarily the right solution for their entire life. I mean, I've always kind of said that children are like arrows, right? You're supposed to release them at age 18 or 25, whenever they're financially independent. But it's our goal as parents to slowly give more and more and more trust and let them make mistakes along the way, but they're not the most destructive type. They're not the kind that eat your soul. They're the kind that bruise your knee. And that you learn as you're releasing freedoms. And so what we're doing is one step in the process, but there's many other solutions out there. And so think about your plan to release for your kids, to release the freedoms in a healthy way, and to be there as a loving parent alongside as they scrape their knee, and create design dilemmas for them, whatever that looks like. But just be a bit more intentional than you currently are, would be my only advice here.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that once again, because that being cautious, that communicates a care for your offspring. If you don't care about somebody, it's not going to make a difference to you. You're not going to have concern, but this concern that you're showing actually reflects your care. So I really appreciate that sentiment coming through for parents who are trying to prevent their children from becoming encountering these problems through technology. Chris, this is just a kind of an off-subject question. Is Techless I thought I read that it was the third company you had started. Had you done a couple other ones?
Yeah. So I've done a film company where I did a lot of traveling. I probably traveled to like 18 different countries doing a lot of ministry, like promotional film type work.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy stories there. I mean, I
Yeah.
interviewed the Russian Minister of Education,
Oh,
and
really?
like, I mean, like, you know, just
That's
all kinds of
crazy.
cool stuff. But there was that, and then I mean, I got to interview the Beach Boys. You know, I don't know, it's cool stuff.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
but there was that, and then after that I did an ad agency at our family business, so it was one of the 8 subsidiary
Okay.
companies, and so I had a team and we worked to just do a lot of internal cultural change and launching brands and such. And
That's so
so
neat.
the film company, actually one of our clients was Chick-fil-A, and that's sort of
No
what got
way.
my wife and I into foster care, because I don't know if you're familiar, but Chick-fil-A's ministry, kind of the Ronald McDonald home, is called Windshape Homes. It is
Mm-hmm.
just A+, world class, amazing ministry, and they do foster care right.
Yeah.
And I got to interview that, did a piece that aired on Super Bowl game day on ESPN.
Wow.
But I got to talk to so many parents and see lives change through the foster care system and these relationships that we're talking about. I mean, truly life transformation.
Yeah.
And that kind of set a new path for my wife and I as far as how we live our lives.
That's so great. I actually work at Chick-fil-A right now, and I love the WinShape camps that they go to. It's really cool. I actually saw that on your website that you had an ad or something aired on the Super Bowl day, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Nice.
And the foster child experience, man, that is something great. I think families would that's just something great to do. Like, you're making a lasting impact there. Through relationships for these kids. So just congratulations and thank you for doing that, Chris. And man, that's a huge step for people to take. When I was growing up, my family hosted exchange students, and basically, for those of you who don't know what that is basically students from another country, high school students, come over and they school here, and it gets them foreign experience so that they can go home, and that looks good on resumes and things like that. And basically, they pick a host family, and then they put these students in these solid family homes where they can get a good American experience. So that's just another great way, because a lot of us think the only way for me to make a difference outside my family is adoption, and that's not really the case, because there are these other awesome opportunities. Chris, all of that was kind of a tangent, but I thought it was important to put in there. Chris, what's one thought you would leave with listeners today regarding just digital distraction and how it can harm us?
Yeah, I don't have any great profound thoughts here. I would just say
Mm-hmm.
right now, as you're seeing the true face of big tech,
Yeah.
um, support overtly with your attention and with your money companies like Techless, like Covenant Eyes, like Fight the New Drug, that are making a difference here. Buy their products, invest in them, whatever that looks like for you, because this is a noble cause. It's something that can change the life of your family and thousands of families here. And I just know right now it's a struggle sometimes. Early stage startup, life's
Yeah.
not easy. My wife said the last 6 months have been the hardest of our marriage in the last 8 years, and that's because we're fighting on the front lines here. For this.
Yeah.
It's a worthwhile cause.
Yeah.
My wife truly believes it is, but just support us, and that would be a huge,
Yeah.
huge help. So
Absolutely. Guys, I will put the techless.com website, all of their info down in the description of the show notes. Be sure to check that out. They're doing a lot of great stuff. Everything that I've looked into has just kind of blown me away, in the sense of I didn't know this was going on. And it's great to see a company actually not only giving their attention to these things, but providing solutions, putting a message out there. So I'll put the information for Techless down below. Check out the Wisephone. That sounds like an amazing thing, especially what they're marketing it towards families and minimalists. Definitely check that out. Thank you so much for being on the show, Chris. It's been an honor to have someone with similar values, and someone who has chosen to value marriage and family and protecting that from these things. And obviously, because we value that so much here, we respect you, firstly as a husband and a father, but secondly because you're doing all of these good successful things in the sense of you're preventing harm for people. So thank you so much for doing that, and thank you for being on the show. It's been great to have you.
Yeah, Seth, likewise, the honors. It's been quite an honor. I really appreciate everyone's time and attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, for those of you listening, you can now follow the Restoring Rapport podcast on Instagram. Be sure to rate and review. The more ratings and the reviews that we get, the further up we're boosted on the Apple analytics. So the more people will find our show. If you haven't bought my books yet, check out those. The link is in the description. The Restoring Rapport podcast posts regularly on social media for quotes relating to marriage and family. So follow them for there as well. And thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We really appreciate it.